Herbs chapter, which has so much, beautiful similes. And some of those similes, oh, sorry, Lindy, you have anything to say before I start?
Oh, not really, Sonam. Just to thank you so much for continuing the group with us. Always extreme appreciation, but nothing really much.
Okay.
I think wonderful. Thank you.
All right. So I was just thinking if you have any announcement or anything like that. Anyway,
No.
Thank you everyone for coming along, and taking interest, to continue taking interest in this Sutra study group. And we are still, of course, continuing with our the latest sutra that we have been studying for all this year, the Lotus Sutra. And still we have quite a long way to go. But I think it's a very, long sutra as we know it. But the reason why, of course, we started with this, we decided to study, is this is sutta, one of those sutras that actually has a defining impact in East Asian Buddhism. And there are particular, in fact, whole schools, traditions founded in the name of this sutra. Schools, Buddhist devotions, much of Buddhist devotions, excuse me, even in most of the Mahayana tradition, of course, most of the Buddhist devotions, I would say, actually have some a direct impact from this particular sutra. Okay, so let me share the slide.
I'm sorry to interrupt again. It just seems I'm not sure what Jurgen's doing with his system. He's sharing his screen.
It's okay. If I share this, then probably we can.
It will go.
I hope so. Did it go?
Yes, we have your screen now. Thank you so much.
So let's see. Okay. Yep. So, so what let me take back. Okay. So this doesn't allow me to go to the. Okay. Maybe actually it might. So if we go in the beginning, this content, you will see that in last session we've been talking about herbs, and this is just I think abstraction of one of these one of the similes that is being used, where disciples, especially we are talking about Pratyek Buddha and Pratyek Buddhas or Shravakas, or interested mostly in the, let's put this way, not in most exalted form of Buddhist teaching. So the idea is that disciples or Buddhist disciples, or even you could say general human beings, we tend not to recognize our ultimate potential. So therefore, we are kind of satisfied with mediocre status. And the idea there is because of that, you have things like, remember these rich elderly men with so much of a wealth, and who is our only son, and not being able to see him 15 years, for almost 50 years, and later on, when he met his father, and how wealthy he was, he just couldn't take it. In fact, because he was so scared of belonging to this mighty family, he just ran away. The idea, the point is that we are unable to sometimes, in fact, realize and appreciate what we are capable of. And that's important because, after all, these three vehicles, in fact, the skill-based Buddhist teachings are all about inculcating in the end that human beings, or in fact all the beings, are capable of realizing full enlightenment, becoming fully awakened Buddhas, not just arhats, individual liberation, but they can become samyak buddhi, fully enlightened beings. But the reason why we are scared of that kind of approach is because we think that, well, first of all, it would take incalculable aeons time for us to get there, and that's time factor. Because remember, if you think about Shakyamuni Buddha, and this time we will look into in one of the chapters where he actually go back into the make the references in the past and talks about his own when he become become Buddha, and how long it took. So and of course the time factor is one thing, but at the same time, the sort of enormity of the responsibility you are supposed to undertake. So if you propose, or you project is become full enlightened being, then of course we are not seeking individual liberation. This individual liberation basically is just offshoot, but the main aim is to become enlightened, fully enlightened, so that you can actually do maximum service for the benefit of all beings. And then, of course, herbs, you notice that there are different analogies being used where Buddha is sometimes symbolized as the sun, sometimes the moon, sometimes it's rain. And what they do, sun, moon, or the rain, they do actually, what they do is they do without any discrimination. They provide the facilities, provide water, provide rain, provide sunshine, provide light equally, with equal distribution. But individually, when we make our own decisions, we take what we need, so leave the rest. In the sense we think that we, because we are incapable of absorbing everything that Buddha has to teach. And then of course it's so in that sense you can notice that all the chapters, when the Shravakas are prophesied, Buddha prophesies the Shravakas, even the individual liberation seekers, what we called Buddha's elder disciples, when they were prophesied to become Buddha, they basically get shocked. And not only this, of course, discourse on ekayana, the claim that in the end, Buddha has only one ultimate goal in his mind, and that is to teach the only vehicle that actually brings all beings to become to come to terms with, come to realization of their full potential, and that is to become Samyak Buddha, right? Become fully enlightened beings. So now this chapter 6, which is the focus of this. Okay, has more prophecies. But so I think because it's a prophecy, prophesizing some of Buddha's disciples, I think there is not much sort of content that we can discuss. So in fact, we will just go through them quickly, and then move to the next chapter. Okay. You'll notice that Shravaka bhikkhus of mine, if you look into Buddha's disciples, among Buddha's disciples, in Mahayana tradition, in Mahayana literature, of course, you will see so many hosts of bodhisattvas. Not only bodhisattvas, so many different types of gods, so many different types of beings comes to listen to Buddha's teaching. And you will notice that even in Pali texts, of course, you will notice mostly the Shravakas, such as Ananda, Mahakashapa, Mahamoglayana, and those former disciples are mentioned. But no, usually you won't find bodhisattvas around. But generally, of course, you will see that in Mahayana texts, you will see, of course, Buddha is also surrounded by bodhisattvas, both males and females, but also, of course, Shravakas and different types of deities. Because therefore, you remember, whenever the sutra ends, whenever the discourse ends, there is always applauding Buddha's discourses. And there are so many hosts of beings, and sometimes they are explicitly named. Anyway, the prophecy here is about prophecy of Shravakas. Because bodhisattvas, it's no surprise, because bodhisattvas' ultimate goal is to become Buddha. So when they become Buddha, of course, would be surprised in a certain sense. But it won't be surprised too much because that's their aim. They have been ultimately working towards it. And then, of course, when they are made that announcement, made the prophecy, it would inspire them more, of course, to take that. But when the prophecy is made about the Shravakas becoming fully enlightened, then, of course, it becomes something slightly meta and different matter altogether. Especially if you I don't know if nowadays in current situation you have a Shravaka tradition held mostly by Theravadins. And if you ask to them, if you say to them, well, one day you will have to become Buddha. Look, what happened to most of the Shravaka disciples of the Buddha. Buddha prophesies them. They become that they at a certain point they will become fully enlightened. I don't know what would they respond. They might say, well, Shravakas usually, and they would say, in fact, generally the justification is that's not important because after all, to become a Samyak Sambodhi, Buddha, fully enlightened being, sort of seed is limited. Seed is limited. Why? Because the potential to become that kind of being is also limited. So that's usually they would say. But there is also, I think, for Mahayanis, we might say, okay, we can take this for granted. But I think there's a Mahayanis, if we call ourselves Mahayanis, we know that actually only after many, many eons, there will be a Buddha. Buddha who turns Dharma wheel. And just like before, this is the fourth Buddha, and then before that there were only three. So then, if we actually see that there is the only post for Samyaksa Buddha is the post of somebody who actually turns the wheel of Dharma, then it looks like it's impossible. How many beings in the world, in these galaxies? We are not talking about this world, because even in this world, we can see infinite number of beings. Because just not on human beings, all the beings, sentient beings, are potential Buddhas. Now, if that's the case, you could say potential Buddhas, but then if the post is so limited, it happens only once a while in aeons, then it might be a good theory, but in practice it seems to be impossible. So there has to be a different explanation how that Buddhahood happens. So in that sense, of course, you could say, yes, if you become fully enlightened, you don't have to become a wheel turner, Dharma wheel turner, just like Shakyamuni Buddha. But you become enlightened being, maybe of not that enormous significance or enormous status. But of course, because once you become Buddha, you will turn the Dharma in your own way, but not to the extent that Dharma wheel turners of the four Buddhas. So in a sense, this has some sort of a different explanation how that happens. And in Tibetan, of course, some of the prayers, you will see that actually every particles of the universe has, Buddhas are just like, and the number of particles it has. So when there's so many Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, equal to the number of particles in the universe. So if that is the case, if that is some justification, how justification how and when the beings can become Buddha, then of course it looks like it's possible. But if it is true, if the Buddha post is restricted to become wheel turner Buddha, then I think it might be, in theory, one may become Buddha, but that may take an enormous time to realize it. Anyway, so here, of course, when you look up at the prophecies of Shravakas, remember Shravakas, the individual liberation seekers. They're not interested to become fully enlightened for their own, for the benefit of all beings, but they want to become liberated for their own good. That does not mean they are egocentric beings. They are not, absolutely, because the only way, at least in Buddhist, general structure, the only way one can become liberated is only if they release themselves from egocentricity. So sometimes you might think, okay, these individual liberation seekers, Shravakas, are some sort of egocentric beings. They're absolutely not, because the only way to become liberated is actually to realize the freedom from egocentricity. So the difference between the realization of freeing themselves from egocentricity, there is no difference. But the only limit is that they cannot, cope. Let's put it this way: working for all the benefit of all beings. They would be still, of course, would have project enough, dedicated for compassionate beings, compassion towards all beings. So remember, their whole liberation is premised on for infinite practice, infinite love, infinite compassion, right? Infinite equanimity, infinite joy. Those are the major practices even in Theravada tradition. So without cultivating those four infinities, they won't call this bodhicitta, as we call usually in Mahayana is called it, but it is exactly the similar way. So they have to perfect those qualities. Without them, there is no way to become even so-called achieving Pratyek Buddhas and Shravakuhood. Okay, so when you look at this prophecy, we are basically talking about about Kashyapa. I think there some Kashyapa is being prophesied. Kashyapa's Buddhahood is prophesied. Subhudi's Buddhahood is being prophesied, and Mahakatyana's Buddhahood is being prophesied, and Mahamogglayana. Remember, these are some of the major, most important disciples of Buddha, particularly Mahakashyapa. When you think about Kashyapa, that's the founder of its Zen tradition. It's in fact, if you look at it, Zen tradition, they would say, of course, the whole tradition comes from Buddha, and how it came. Buddha transmit the Zen tradition to Kashyapa, Mahakashyapa, and then Mahakashyapa transmit to Ananda, and later on, like that, it come to Bodhidharma, and Bodhidharma went to China, and that's how whole Zen traditions transmitted. So in that sense, of course, a very significant figure. Mahamogglayana, of course, is the person who at least excels in miracles activities. So usually the person who excels in miraculous activities is Mahamogglayana, and person who excels in intelligence. Intelligence also, remember also, if you look at the counterpart, female counterpart, male counterpart and female counterpart, you will see similar sort of disciples having these different qualities. But nevertheless, Mahamogglayana, of course, and if you look Mahamogglayana, Subhuti, Mahakatyana, and Kashyapa, you will see, if you happen to go to Bodh Gaya, there's a big Buddha statue, and there are 10 principal disciples of the stages of 10 principal disciples, and you will notice that all of their names are present there. So that means, of course, they are significant players in Buddha's life. I think other than that, I don't think this chapter has much to say. So you can see, of course, then if you read 6.11, Stavira, Mahamogglayana, brother Subhuti, brother Mahakatyana. Once Kashyapa, first, I think here what happens is, first Buddha announces, prophesies Kashyapa's enlightenment, and then once full enlightenment, and he said Kashyapa will become Tathagata at a certain point. And then and of course Buddha describes all the names of the Buddha, what name that we will have when Kashyapa becomes Buddha. And at that point, of course, a similar structure, I think again Mara is going to comment, stop that, stop Kashyapa to become fully enlightened and things like that. And at a certain point, Mahamogglayana, brother Subhuti, Mahakatyana, they were almost because they are Shravakas, they have the same qualities, they're fully liberated individuals, and they still were sort of in this said trembling bodies and unblinking eyes stared at the Bhagwan, and all three of them in their minds recited this verse: great hero Arhat Shakyalan, supreme human, through your love of us, speak the Buddha's words. Anyway, so gradually in this chapter, you will notice that Buddha, one by one, basically announces and prophesies full awakening. So other than that, I don't think there is much to be discussed in this chapter. So we'll skip. You can see 635 is when Mahamoggalayanas awakening is being announced. I suppose, one thing that we can think about, at least from Mahayana standpoint, is Mahayana really usually stick to this claim that ultimate goal, ultimate end of Buddha's teaching is to become fully enlightened. Now, usually, before I read this sutra, I used to kind of think that maybe that's actually that's one thing that Tibetans have kind of popularized it. Is it a myth that came somehow originated in Tibet? Some of those, of course, facts that about Buddhist tradition, particularly Tibetan tradition, you could say yes, originated by the Tibetan teachers. Some of them. It's no surprise. I used to think this might be one of the things that actually come from the Tibetans, but turns out actually it goes way back into the own Mahayana sutras. And you will also notice that next chapter in this sutra, chapter 7, this is another sort of contentious thing that this is, and this is also, this chapter raises an interesting debate among the nature of Buddha Shakyamuni, right? Remember, if this is true, of course, the chapter says, and if it attributes this Buddha's teaching to the Buddha himself, many, of course, traditional Buddhists would do that, but most of the modernists would not do that because it's authored by somebody else anyway, written much later. So the problem, well, let's put it this way. Okay, the idea is that if Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha was enlightened a long time ago, and he was just displaying in this event, the enlightened sort of moment, just displaying, is it true? Is Buddha not lying? Is the process that he's going through or displaying to the beings, that starving himself for 6 years, is this just display? And then, of course, Mara's events. Are they real Maras who came to attack him, or is that another story? And is the Buddha, Shakyamuni, a real deal? I don't know if we can put it this way. And then usually Buddhology, if you think about Buddhology, Buddha's, the study of Buddha, what is to become Buddha, you can usually see Buddha being Buddhology as a description of Sambhogagaya. Or put this way, you got the Buddha's quality are more, attributed sometimes as a mental and sometimes a physical. So if you think about physical qualities Buddha, let's say Buddha's manifestation. This is supposed to be a manifestation, right? Is manifestation of Buddha real Buddha? Can we take that manifestation of Buddha, which is a Shakyamuni Buddha, remember, as a real Buddha? If he is not the real Buddha, if he's just displaying himself, is an illusion, why should we take his teaching seriously? That raises enormous important questions. Because after all, what we are teaching, we have, is actually taught by Shakyamuni Buddha. And if Shakyamuni Buddha is just a display, just an apparition of some event that happened millions of years ago, then what should we take? Is there actually any benefit in taking the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha seriously? After all, if Shakyamuni Buddha is just a mere manifestation. And there are, of course, the Tibetan teachers who actually say that. Because Shakyamuni Buddha is just a mere manifestation, it's not the real deal, not the real one. The real Buddha was long, enlightened long ago. if that's the case, then I think we have a serious problem. The serious problem is that then these teachings that we are supposedly attributing to Shakyamuni Buddha, they cannot be the real, teachings of Buddha. If they are not the real teachings of, because if Buddha himself is not real, then how can we take his teachings to be real, the teachings of Buddha? So I think those of us position has this struggle, the tension between taking this event, right? Okay, chapter 7 event seriously, and then if you take these, there is a Shakyamuni Buddha was a God Buddha or realized Buddha long ago, and then he was displaying in this as in Bodh Gaya, 2,500 years ago. That's just a made display, made display for the confused. And if that made display is not authentic Buddha, then I think we got a serious problem, because then, well, this is not real Buddha's teaching. So then, there is no justification, because after all, if it is not Buddha himself, if it's not authentic Buddha, then any teaching he taught cannot be authentic. Excuse me 1 minute, sorry, please. I think I might have drank too much.
이해수업시대다. 이해수업시대다. 암주 뒤에 현황 웃어. 찌들이
Sorry for that. Hey, any questions so far? Okay, so what I'm basically referring to is the tension that I see between Dharmakaya, for example, Dharmakaya and Rupakaya, Chuku and Longku, right? Sambhogakaya and Nirmankaya. So Nirmankaya is supposed to be manifestation body. Dharmakaya is the truth body. So if truth body, and if you split them as some sort of physical quality Buddha and the mental quality Buddha, and the mental qualities of Buddha are not somehow one individual, and then we really have a problem, tension that cannot be resolved. So And that's why I think for some of the scholars within the Tibetan, I mean, there are many Tibetans who claim that actually Buddhas don't have a mind, because real Buddha is a Buddha that is transcendent. Buddha cannot have a mind. Buddha can't see. Buddha cannot see anything, any phenomena. And if that's the source, if that's the case, then how would they teach? How would they decide? Okay, this is Ananda, this is Shara. Of course, Buddha was announcing here. And then remember, Buddha has to also see the qualities of disciples. Just make a distinction between what they understand, what they don't understand, what is suitable for them, what is not suitable for them. How would they make a distinction if Buddha is some transcendent individual, just like the conception of God in Christian tradition or Hindu tradition, some transcendent being that doesn't have the cognition, that doesn't have a mind. And of course, many Tibetans still hold this view. The reason why they do that is because they take this account seriously, namely that Buddha, the real Buddha, was Buddhahood, also the event realization, or was an event that took place millions and billions of years ago, and the Shakyamuni Buddha was just a manifestation. He was just a displaying, and that's not the real Buddha. Therefore, the real Buddha cannot have the physical body that we attribute to the Shakyamuni Buddha. Anyway, there are a lot more interesting philosophical conundrums or puzzles that arises from that kind of view, conflict, because there's a real tension. So the way I resolve, or the way I see it is, if you don't split, you have to understand, even if this event took place, let's say Shakyamuni Buddha was long ago enlightened, and that Shakyamuni Buddha and this Buddha is, his a very long name, Maha Abhigyan Gyan Abhibu, right? That's his name in the previous life. That's when he's got enlightened. Maha Abhigyan Gyan Abhibu, who got 16 sons, and they all become Buddha. And so anyway, let's return to this text, and then of course, if there are issues, two questions that pops in your mind, please raise them. Now, this question, basically, chapter 7, basically justifies what Tibetan's traditional belief, and that's, yes, is a distinction between Dharmakaya, Rupakaya, and Sambhogakaya, and Nirmankaya, and the Shakyamuni Buddha is just a Nirmankaya. And Sambhogakaya is Shakyamuni Buddha when he was in heaven, when he was teaching to his mother. Dharmakaya is the real Dharmakaya attained because mind when he become a Buddha, right? So usually, if you sort of split and make this division and try to understand them separately, then we have a real irreconcilable problem, right? Because then almost like the mind-body problem in the West nowadays, it's a huge. Nobody in the West, I see, actually is able to bring this to because the very principle, the category they have driven the wedge is irreconcilable. They thought that human existence is, they are human being as after Descartes. This is actually after Descartes, what you call now, we call Cartesian dualism, where mind is a one thing, body is another thing. Mind is completely independent from body, right? Even though they interact at a certain point, Descartes thought there's some called pineal gland, and that's how they interacted. But of course, and that because he started with the problem. His problem is understandable because it came from all these theological belief that human beings have a soul, and the soul is independent from the body, and soul is the thinking substance. And now, how do you actually resolve this tension? Body and mind, and they're so completely independent. If that's the case, of course, in the Judeo-Christian tradition, that makes sense. Even in large majority of Hindu tradition, that makes sense because they are Atmavadan. They want to explain everything, rebirth and everything, based on the soul. But if you are Buddhists who don't accept soul, If you don't, soul means independently existing mind. That's what it is. Now, if Buddhists accept same thing, then there is no difference between Atmavadi. It's just only name, right? If you accept mind to be something independent, so-called conscious to be independent, then I think we have lost a lot of fundamental beauty in Buddha's teaching called interdependence. And not only the doctrine of 5 skandha. If you look at the 5 skandha doctrine, which says those 5 skandhas, remember 5 aggregates? Buddha, and not only Buddha, after most of the Indian traditions, including Nagarjuna, they say they are like 5 reeds, bunch of reeds put together, and then basically standing, supporting each other like that. If you pull one, then all other will collapse. So if mind goes away, even the body won't survive. So in that sense, I think and that problem also is reflected in the understanding of mind and body of a Buddha. So if you split the two, you got an irreconcilable problem. Of course, philosophers will be very interested in exploiting that, because they will keep their job because they got something to do. But if you are a practitioner, are not interested in puzzles, and sort of these intellectual puzzles, just really want to develop the appreciation of Buddha's quality, then it's actually it might not be a nicest thing. Anyway, okay. So here in this chapter, bhikshus in the past, in the time gone by, beyond and even further beyond, the most countless, innumerable, incalculable, unquantifiable, inconceivable, asankhya, that's the word. Asankhya is a Sanskrit word. Basically, it's inconceivable period. Was a moment when some event arose, and that is when the great being named Maha-Abhijnana Gyan Abhipu, that's the name of, become fully enlightened. And that turns out to be the Buddha, Shakyamuni. So what we call Shakyamuni Buddha, that displayed enlightenment, actually the event literally took place incalculable aeons ago, right? So he says, at that time in the era, in an aeon named Maharupa, a world named, okay, I won't read that. Anyway, the one with a perfect wisdom and a conduct, the Sugata, the one who knows the world, the unsurpassable guide who tames beings, the teacher of the devas and humans, the Buddha, and the Bhagwan named Maha-Abhijnana Gyan Abhipu emerged. And he says, and of course, he gives an example how long it is. So I think that the analogy is that if you have let's say, and this is how he says, how long it has been since that Tathagata appeared. And that's why the Tibetans are quite justified in believing that actually, yes, Buddha was, become Buddha a long time ago. And how long? Well, he says, because it is like this. A man crushed all the earth of the world into in this realm of billions worlds into powders. Billion worlds, I'm talking about not just one world, billion world into powders. Imagine that you basically just smash the whole world into your grinder. Smash that. And now you take each particle into and that far away, right? And then he says, okay, then the man takes a single smallest particle of dust from those worlds and goes beyond the 1,000 world into the eastern direction, puts it down there. Goes into western direction, put it down there. Now like that, northern, southern, and then how long it would take? How long it would take for one individual to do that? And then finish the whole this, hold the powder. I mean, certainly looks like incalculable. So this word asankhya, inconceivable, unquantifiable period. So in that sense, yes, I think the traditional Tibetan account that Buddha was enlightened, Shakyamuni Buddha was enlightened long ago, that seems to be at least, well, of course, you can ask a question about this sutra itself. How far is this sutra authentic? Is it actually attributable to Buddha himself, or is it somebody composed later on? And most likely, actually, because Buddha, during the time of Buddha did not compose any text. That's, we can say with a guarantee, because no composition did exist during the time of Buddha, no papers even. So if Buddha taught, then maybe, of course, during the time of Buddha, usually disciples listen to Buddha's teaching, and Buddha gives various sutras. The whole reason why Buddha gives sutras are those few words. Do means a sort of summarized version, and then they try to memorize, and that's their formula for meditation, right? That's their formula for meditation. So there's no long discursive discourses. Buddha would give you, so when you go to Buddha, Buddha's a practical teacher. He won't be just involving in philosophical acrobats, just like we do. He won't be interested along this, sort of long convoluted discussions, because it doesn't have, the real impact. Anyway, so he would, this is what he, if you look into traditional early Buddhist texts, there are so much of repetition. People want to think, okay, what sort of text is that? It's so much of repetition. Makes sense, because practice is all about meditation. Practice is all about repetition. If you don't repeat, there is no way that you can develop anything, and that's no surprise. For anything in the world, even the mundane things, if you don't repeat, let's say you want physically fit, and you go to gym. Exercise regime in gym is all about the repetition. If you repeat more and more, then you become better and better, right? If you don't repeat, if you're not tempted, if you're not into repetition, unfortunately, that's it. You just try once and then give up and nothing achieved. And Buddhahood actually is training, and training process is this regime of going through again and again. But the one thing is, of course, one thing different for the practitioners don't get bored. The reason why good practitioners don't get bored is because for practitioner, every moment is a new moment. Every moment is a new moment. It's therefore there is no repetition, strictly speaking. And that's why generally when you think about the doctrine of impermanence, nothing is repeated. Nothing is repeated. If nothing is repeated, there is no technical, though there is no called rebirth. Rebirth means to be, to be born again. You were some individual in the past, and the same individual is being born. Not possible on Buddhist the ontology of impermanence, because everything is constant flux. If everything is constant flux, no event can be repeated. No event it can be repeated. No event, no thing can be reborn, right? So every event is a new opportunity if he actually sees that, and that's why to being in the present moment for a meditator is so fundamentally important, because that's the only moment when you actually really catch and embrace the reality. So which means boredomness does not arise for the meditators, because every moment, of course, if you think about sort of speculate, imagine anything, oh yeah, it's the same thing, but actually never the same thing. Anyway, I'm not sure where I'm heading. So this point of sort of incalculable, inconceivability, unquantifiability, the concept certainly is not something Tibetans have made. Actually, you can see this come from here. But then, of course, the only way to show it is actually what Buddha does, to using examples. And he says also, even if there's a mathematician, he won't be able to calculate the time, how long that would take. And probably we won't have actually number to even to illustrate, to represent. So he says, a great mathematician could calculate the number of the worlds in which particles were. Okay. Particles were placed, and number of those in which particles were not placed. So if, and basically the point is, it is not possible to calculate. So let's say that this is, and then of course there is another thing, because there has been such an inconceivable, such an immeasurable length of time since the Tathagata passed with Nirvana, but through possessing the power of a vision of a Tathagata, I remember that Nirvana as if it were yesterday or today. Now here's the difference. because it took, on the one hand, it took incredible years ago, but Buddha is able to literally remember it as if it is something that happened yesterday, because it's in a certain sense, event is almost a kind of a new thing. Now there's a little translation, I think. I don't know whether our translator says that actually in the summary, if you read the summary of the chapter, that this Buddha, remember Buddha, Maha Abhijnan, Gyan Abhibhu, this chapter says has 16 sons, and one of the 16 sons is the progenitor of the of the Buddha who become Buddha, the successor of, what's the predecessor of the Shakyamuni Buddha. But I think there might be a slightly, at least on my reading, that seems to be a mistake, because here basically Sutra seems to be saying Maha Abhijnan Gyan Abhibhu himself is the predecessor of the Shakyamuni Buddha, not one of his sons. Okay, there might be a slight. So I was trying to look hard where is the justification for their assertion, but there's a minor thing. Okay, so what happens then? Why is this important? Well, okay. Now, one thing he says in 7.13, because the lifespan of Tathagata, okay, before the Bhagwan attained the highest complete enlightenment of perfect Buddhahood, he went into the sublime supreme Bodhimanda. Bodhimanda is Bodhgaya. Well, that's one interesting thing, and this is again one of the popular. I would sometimes think it's some sort of popular myth, but it looks like again comes from this sutra itself. Bodhimanda is Bodhgaya, and Bodhgaya under Bodhi tree. That's Bodhimanda. And it is generally being asserted that all the Buddhas, whoever becomes enlightened, actually get enlightened in India. So India is Pagyul, Tibetan word, we'll say Pagyul, the land of Aryas, land of exalted beings. Not a Pak. The Tibetan word has two Pakpas, right? Our Pakas and Pak, that's Aryas. Then Pakapak, that's a pig, dirt. And it looks like India is both. Interesting sometimes. I'm not saying bad thing against India, but comparatively, India's the land, beautiful on the one hand, so diverse and so rich, but so filthy on the other hand. So if you look, the whole both sort of definition seems to be satisfied in India. But the point that Mike making is not as a pejorative sense, but actually the fact that all the Buddhas decides to become Buddha at Bodh Gaya says a lot about this, something, there is something, I suppose, something, really significant, something so wonderful about India, and particularly the Bodh Gaya as a place. And he says he conquered and defeated the entire army of Mara. Having defeated and conquered it, he thought, I shall attain highest complete enlightenment of peace, both in Buddhahood. Buddhahood. Again, that thought again generated in Bodhimanda in Bodh Gaya. While those qualities had not yet. Oh, Kamala Sunda.
So this is the use the alpaca parks on there.
Oh, alpaca Pakhasen Park.
Alpaca se park. Okay, to check.
Pakba say the Arya Sejra.
Oh, yeah, to check.
It's a Sanskrit word, Arya, Tibetan word is alpacas and park. Because if you read Paka Park, then it's a pig. So even though it's pronounced exactly the same, but there's a vast difference. One means pig, one means noble being, exalted being. So India is land of noble beings. And I don't know exactly, does it mean that there is something unique about Indian people, particularly the people in the North India and those areas? Maybe. Why is it that actually Buddhas all the Buddhas choose that particular destination? Why not somewhere else? Why not Tibet? We didn't think Tibet is precious land. one or somewhere else in China or some place. Anyway, the question, an interesting question, but I don't have the answer to that. Okay, so then while those qualities had not yet manifested, set on the Bodhi Manda at the foot of a Bodhi tree, remember, for the entire intermediate eon. And it looks like we generally say this, to become fully Samyak Sambuddha, you have to work eons and eons. So that's why, because of time factor and the duration, people get tired and they think it's too long. I can't have that kind of, I can't go along. I mean, that long. My perseverance won't that last long. So therefore, whereas Arya, Shravakas, you become Shravakas within one life. Not only that, if you take Mahasatipatthana Sutra, Buddha says the most intelligent one actually becomes Shravaka in one day. In mediocre takes only 7 days to become fully liberated. So look at the time span. Only 7 days. Most intelligent guys actually can take 1 day. 1 day of practice, and that's all they need. Whereas if there's constant, persistent teaching, of course, practice, with not even one moment missing, not because when you missing means if there's a little bit of negligence or those things that occurs, lack of awareness, lack of mindfulness, then they are sort of let's put this way, moments of adharma, not the dharmic moments. So if you have no such moments, then of course it takes only 7 years even for the mediocre practitioner. But on the other hand, for Buddhahood, that takes this kind of eons. And then he said, not only that, he has sat there for second intermediate eons, but still did not attain the highest complete enlightenment of the perfect Buddhahood during the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, and 10th intermediate eons. He said for Bodhimanda, at the foot of Bodhi tree, with the legs always crossed, never standing up. Looks like Buddha was there for a long time. Eons. How could that make sense? Didn't he die? I don't know what we're talking about here. With his mind unwavering, his body motionless, but even so, during the time of those qualities did not manifest for him. So it was there for a long, long time, right? Intimate, sort of 10th, intermediate eons, 10 eons. It looks like he said, I mean, if you take this Sutra series, then he was there in Bodh Gaya for 10 years. Can we take that literally? Then he didn't die, of course, if you take this seriously. But it might mean something else. But generally, of course, if you look at these sutras, they are very, very, I don't know, maybe hyperbolic. Maybe that's another hyperbolic language coming into the author or whoever wrote this. Okay. Anyway, the idea is it took so many eons for the Buddha to become a Buddha. So he was still there and still struggling. He didn't attain it. And eventually, of course, he does. And when he does, of course, become fully enlightened being. And then he says, 7.17 bhikkhus, after 10 intermediate eons had passed, Tathagata the Arahat, perfectly enlightened being of Buddha, Maha Abhigan, Gyan Abhipu, attained the highest complete enlightenment of perfect Buddhahood. Okay. When the Bhagwan was young, now he has his 16 sons. He says, just like, remember, Shakyamuni Buddha had only one son, Rahula, and you will note later on come across that Rahula also Buddha will prophesy Rahula's complete enlightenment later at this stage. But Maha Abhigan, Gyan Abhipu had 16 sons, and Maha Abhigan, Gyan Abhipu was Shakyamuni's predecessor. He was saying, that was me. That's when I got enlightened. But it took actually 10 intermediate eons for me to get enlightened, and I got enlightened at Bodh Gaya, the same Bodhimanda. On the one hand, of course, it clarified most of the myths that associate with that, because we tend to think these are the Tibetan, interesting Tibetan Mahayana sort of makings, but it looks like this actually comes straight from those this kind of sutras. Now, we won't have much time, I think, so I'll skip this. Basically, what happens is then, because now Buddha was Maha Abhigyan Gyan Abhipu was fully enlightened, and then he later on, of course, his 16 sons will also follow him, but then his 16 sons will request Buddha to turn the wheel of Dharma. This Buddha, I'm talking about Maha Abhigyan Gyan Abhipu Buddha, right? And this request came from all over the world. And you can see there's a long, long list of the requests. Okay. Basically, he asked them now to share this unsurpassable teaching. First with the by his sons, and then different gods. Remember, if you look, Shakyamuni Buddha, Sakara, and Sakara was the one, Indra and Sakara actually requested Buddha to teach, because initially we thought it was just, okay, he thought that what I actually realized was so deep and profound, only the silence can understand it, and you will take enormous being to be able to understand it. So it was he was sitting there in enjoying his Buddhahood, but at the same time deep samadhi. But then so many beings, of course, were making the requesting Buddha to teach, and in the end is the gods, the kings of gods. The king of gods comes to Buddha and asks him. Mara, what Mara did? Mara asked Buddha to say, "Now you have achieved your goal. Please pass away, enter into parinirvana." Basically, Mara asked Buddha to die immediately, and Buddha said, "No, I'm not going to do. I'm not going to die, Mara. My job has not finished yet." And he said, "And my job is not finished until unless all my Sangha community." And the interesting thing is, the soul Sangha community all involve both monks and nuns, lay men and lay women, right? And that's on the one hand, some people, of course, say Buddha was a sort of sexist in the beginning, and then later on he changed his mind. But it looks like from the very beginning, the moment he became enlightened, he was so clear in his response to Mara that he won't die until unless all his Sangha members are complete and established. And those Sangha members involve both monks, monks and nuns, and the lay people, lay monks and laymen and lay women, right? So that's the important point. But here, of course, the requests come from all over the world, mostly devas, because ordinary beings won't understand who is he, whether somebody's got enlightened, they won't have a clue. But whereas devas, because they are so let's say clairvoyant, they understand, and so that's why requests came from being made, basically asked to turn the wheel of Dharma, and that's the request. Further request to these verses: "You with a sign of 100 merits, unequal guide, great Rishi, teach Dharma." That's what. So the requests. Again here 748 more requests from more different types of devas, and so there are so many different devas, class of devas. The one thing that you will notice is this word. Okay, sometimes when you read the sutras, you might get the option, these Buddhas are total kind of nuts when you believe cosmology with so much of different things. On the one hand, that might be, from the more materialistic, mechanistic way of understanding, it might be true, because only thing that we are, at least the science takes seriously, is body, brain. Human consciousness is no other than brain. When brain dies, everything collapses. But now, I mean, so far that's the bedrock of science. Now even the science actually are, interestingly, becoming more open, because they think that, of course, there are a lot of unanswered questions, and those unanswered questions, if science is open, they have to investigate them. One of which is the mystery behind lots of tales that young children who are untaught, and they of the narrations about the past life, remembrance, memory. Sometimes it could come in the dreams, sometimes nightmares. And there is a whole group in University of Virginia, who studied these cases, and sometimes they have 2,500 cases, if in India, China, and they thought that it actually happens only in the countries where people believe in rebirth. Turns out, actually, there are so many of those cases where the people don't believe in rebirth at all. In fact, hardcore Christians don't believe in rebirth. They believe that it's either hell or heaven. There's no rebirth. And then when they give birth to a child who has all these interesting stories and stories to tell about their past life, then of course the scientists got interested. So there's a whole group now actually questioning the whole the paradigm, scientific paradigm that says that we are just material body with a brain as a mind. So if that's the case, I'm quite convinced, right? Maybe it might sound dogmatic, but I'm convinced that as myself a meditator, a practitioner, I'm convinced that one day science will come to what actually exactly what Buddhists was talking about. And it seems that actually now more and more metaphysical notions of so-called Western science, that hardcore idea that brain is hardwired, that there is, once you're born with some feature that cannot be changed, that also fundamentally being changed. And then even in this kind of cosmological end, gradually if science becomes really flexible, as it should, stay open as it should, then I think it will come to terms with understanding that there is human beings, not only human beings, sentient beings are more than just our bodies. And in fact, especially when you study about the deep meditation during the time of death and dying process, particularly Thakchoe process, the real action is within the nervous system, not in the head. And meditators, especially when you go deep meditation, most of meditation action happens within the chakras, and that's a well sort of attested tradition in the yogic tradition in India as well as in Tibet, and mostly in the chakras. You go into the nervous system, that's where the action is, not in your head, because within the head it's all the function here happens only in the neurological level. Lots of thought arises. The deeper, more mystical, more sublime understanding happens when these rough thoughts ceases. Just like a sea, right? When there's a lot of waves here and there and lots of winds coming, you really don't understand. You can't see the clarity of what's happening in the deep. And mind is the real awareness the Buddhist talks about, enlightenment, and this talks about, happens usually when those rough edges cease, comes to an end. And how do they come to an end? When the respiration stops, when the neurological activity stops, the real awareness dawns. And usually that happens in the ordinary people. It happens when they die. They pass through certain stages. But for the meditators, when they go too deep, usually they can not only access, but actually that's the appropriate domain that they need to inculcate to cultivate it deeper. So I'm convinced that at a certain point they will come to at least certain appreciation that these are the things. And what that means is a manifold. That means a different cosmological system, different beings that don't have body, just like us. I mean, it's not let's put it this way, it's not so extravagant to say that even the matter, if it's just a purely materialist mechanism world, you have to claim, you have to accept that atoms you don't see atoms. You don't have access to atoms. You don't have access to molecules. You don't have access to if you break atoms, you have the smaller parts, the neutrons, protons, those you don't have access, but they do exist. You have to accept them. So if that's the case, Buddhists are exactly saying the same thing. Just like matter can exist in so many different stages, some of which we can see, some of which are beyond the threshold of our visibility. In the same way, existence or beings can have exactly the same mode. Some of which are visible, the gross, very superficial level, but the other existence, a much subtle level, where just like oxygen, just like the air. Remember, air is the lifeline, and as long as there exists, there survives consciousness. So, just I think thought that maybe in this somewhat very skeptical, somewhat very confused world, I think completely confused world, and very skewed world, people believe that yes, science is the pinnacle. Science is a solution for everything. Well, there may be solution for a lot of things, but at the same time, disastrous consequences for a lot of things because of the so-called the science, believing that the scientific dogma is the only way. And unfortunately, it might be a way for some discoveries, but if you take the human mind, there is only one way we can develop the understanding, and that is through our own investigation. Okay, so that took me slightly into different direction, but I thought that was interesting. Anyway, okay, because the question arose when you look at these things, so many different cosmos, beings, what are the Brahmas, what are the gods, so many thousand of them. I mean, remember if you look at these Sutras, and they were making requests to Buddha. For us, I mean, okay, maybe let me give you another anecdote that might context us. When sometimes His Holiness Dalai Lama gives teachings in the middle of winter, usually it's not a rainy season. No rains would fall in winter, okay? It doesn't happen most of the cases. But His Holiness comes, start teaching, or maybe he's teaching tomorrow or something. Today all of a sudden there's a rain, and certainly what happens? Some cases people will stand in front of him, right? Basically block him because everybody wants to have the audience of His Holiness, want to see his face directly, and then His Holiness says, "Move away. Let somebody else to have the view too." And if you look around as a human being, there's nobody that you can see at least, but he can see somebody else there, the presence of different beings. Okay, these are not just myths; these are actual events. And then sometimes what we call serpents, snakes. People say, of course, snakes are very, poisonous. In Australia, particularly, snakes are well known poisonous, terrible beings. But snakes are actually remember great Nagarjuna, the protector from great Nagarjuna is a snake, the serpent beings. So serpent beings are actually notorious, always famous for coming, sneaking in whenever there's a Dharma discourse. Somebody giving teaching, snakes would come in and then just listen. Of course, for us, whoa, there's a snake. It's a object of terror. So you just get rid of them. But they actually come to listen Dhamma. In many cases, and the teachers, of course, so they would understand. Those are sometimes in this mechanistic world. Sometimes you might say, "Oh, you're talking about fairy tales," but these are the things. And I think a certain point, maybe might not in our life. At a certain point, I think science will come to terms with understanding that this world is not white and black. It is a beautiful world. It's but so complex, much more complex than just one way of looking things. There are so many different layers, and those different layers are not just mythical layers. That actually, in order to be able to climb up different layers, one has to work hard. And it's just not myth. Basically, it is through understanding the world better, mostly understand ourselves better, that our cognitive abilities becomes heightened, and then we will have those visions that have ability all in so different gods or different beings, the presence of beings around, right? So don't get spooked when people talk about ghosts and those things. Full of them, as you will see in the sutta. Anyway, many of those gods actually comes to Buddha and request the teachings. Okay, so then finally, when all these requests were made, Buddha agreed to teach. Okay, and where is that? I think it's a long way down still. Okay, so these are the requests. I think there's requests being still made. Different Mahabrahmas, right? Different types of devas. See, you can see even in 107, 107, teach a Dharma that we request, take us and this world into your care, speak with your beautiful voice, and that has been accomplished to the billions of eons. Billions of eons. Maybe that's the way to put it. Countless eons or billions of eons. Because it did actually take him billions of eons to become perfected. Okay, so finally he said, okay, agreed. And just like, remember, Shakyamuni Buddha agreed to Mara, Indra and Brahma, that he will, he will teach. And he started with Dhamma Wheel of Four Noble Truths. And this is exactly what happens, yes. Bhikshus, they upon the Bhagavan, the Tathagata, the Arhat, the perfect enlightened Buddha, Maha Abhijan Gyan Abhiphu, knowing what he was requested by many 100,000 quintillions of Brahmins and 16 young princes, at that time, in accord with Dharma, turned the Dharma wheel that he had never turned, because that's the first moment. He's turning Dharma wheel before. He turned Dharma wheel before, but not as a, Tathagata. So in this case, Maha Abhijan Gyan Abhiphu, basically turning Dharma as a mendicant Brahman, Deva, Mara, Brahma in the world. This is, so when he started, this is suffering, this is the origin of suffering, this is cessation of suffering, this is the path leading to the cessation of suffering. This was repeated 3 times so that they were 12 turnings of Dharma wheel. Now, of course, when you look at this, it looks like nothing profound. Conceptually, this doesn't seem to be profound. But for a practitioner, even to understand what suffering is, I think it takes so many practice, so much of practice, even to understand what impermanence is, the change, even to notice change in the body takes a long time, and sometimes many people miss it, in fact. So because after all, if you don't notice the change in the body, then you have no idea what the impermanence is. You may see a tree fall, you may see house collapsing, you may see a forest being being destroyed by the fire. That's impermanence, but that's not impermanence of significance. But impermanence of significance is this: when you meditate, right? When you meditate, close your eyes, focus on your body, and when you know and see your body moving, almost that moving like this, moving like waterfall, moving like the sea waves on the body, waves on the sea. Remember, when the sea is blown by the wind, you will see there's so much of waves. Our teacher called wavelets. And moving like when you're in the front of the car and you are driving maybe 100 kilometers per hour, you see how fast that track in the front of you moves. When you notice that change, you are realizing the change on the experiential level. Until unless that, you think you might have heard Buddha, everything is impermanent. No, you haven't understood what impermanent is. You have no idea what the impermanence is. To be able to understand impermanence is actually to go into the body to actually and then feel the whole of your existence is nothing other than that change. Right? And then, yes, there is a glimmer that, oh yeah, now actually there's what directly, this is called a directly understanding, experiential understanding of impermanence. If you have not that, then even don't claim that you have understood what impermanence is. Forget about selflessness, far away. Forget about emptiness, far away. Nothing to do with emptiness, nothing to do with impermanence, unless you get to that gate. That's the first gate of Dhamma. And remember, suffering, unknowing suffering is still far away. Because with that, first impermanence, remember, impermanence, and then gradually you notice, of course, all the sensations within the body, even the pleasant sensations. You understand that actually pleasant sensations are arises because of previous karma. And now you realize, oh, even because of those present sensations are something not worth cherishing, because of course they are the products of the past karma. Then you realize actually even if they are, the moment we get attached, addicted, it becomes a source of suffering. So that's why I think if you, even though four noble truths formula seems so simple, there's suffering in the world, suffering as a cause can be ended, and there is a path forward. I mean, philosophically, they sound perfect argument, because you can get rid of suffering because there is a cause. All you need to do is get rid of the cause, right? And once you gotten rid of the cause, then you can enjoy the peace. And there is a way to enjoy the peace, and that is the Eightfold Path. Perfect sense. But actually, to be able to understand in the experiential level, because without that, of course, nothing happened, nothing changed. So Buddha's teaching actually comes down to that, having a direct understanding, which means we have to work. We cannot be satisfied and learning and reading these texts and thinking, okay, yeah, I understand Buddha's teaching. I'm a Buddhist. I've been reading this. I've been studying Buddhist texts. Well, that's a good thing, at least. Of course, we began. But sometimes in the end, even the intellectual understanding actually becomes a roadblock. And how they become roadblock, it's like this. I remember very well when, after having studied Buddhist philosophy for long, I thought I know impermanence. I thought Four Noble Truths, all these are old things. I have learned and studied them for years, and then realized actually your head moves faster ahead of your body, and in the end, it is your body that you need to see. Once your body speaks the change, and you are able to see, because body always speaks the change. Because body always manifests the truth. But what the problem is, my mind is not able to actually witness the change, and that's where the problem is. And that the transition has to be made, and the transformation gradually happens when we start working hard, meditating again and again and again. And here again, it's a repetition. Meditation is, getting familiarized. Okay, so yes, I think if you really want to understand Buddha's teaching, then you can see actually Buddha says this: I am just a teacher. I point the path, but you actually are the one who needs to walk. And that makes perfect sense, because the only way we can actually understand profound depth of Buddha's teaching is that we actually experiment them, take them seriously, with the Buddha's words seriously, and experiment them within our body. Body is a vehicle, and if you think this body, in that sense, becomes so useful. Both devas don't have it. Gods don't have it. This body is beautiful, meaningful, because that's why it is called precious human birth, because with this body, it's a vehicle, beautiful vehicle, that we experience both pleasure and joy. And as a result, of course, becomes a very important vehicle, where you use your experience to go forward. Without experience, there is no way of understanding Buddha's teaching, and that's why Buddha says that even devas are unable to understand Buddha's teaching, because they don't. Most of them actually have only blissful experience in their life, no suffering, which means they cannot understand truth of suffering to start with. What sort of example should they give? Because if they have never experienced suffering, they would experience suffering at the last moment, dying moment, and by that time it would be too late. So that's why human life has becomes very precious from that end. And then, of course, what Buddha does here is also he teaches the 12 dependent arising. He says, because in this way, through the factor of ignorance, there is a formation. Now you can see ignorance. We know about this 12 dependent origination, 12 links of dependent origination. I'm sure you have seen that many times. But here you notice it begins with ignorance. It is the ignorance that feeds the whole thing, whole cycle. So the only way we can break this cycle is actually to change the ignorance and turn it into knowledge. And that's what awareness. When we meditate, the whole focus is awareness. Awareness of the breath, not just a single pointed concentration. That's Hindus can do that. Anybody can do that. But actually awareness of the breath, understanding of the breath, that's so important, because actually with that, you can gradually deepen the awareness of the body sensation and the awareness of the change, and that's where the the knowledge of a direct understanding of impermanence begins. And that gradually, if we replace ignorance with the knowledge of impermanence, everything shifts, everything changes. So then what happens? Well, with the cessation of ignorance, cessation of karma. Our karma, the activities that we perform as a result of a mental confusion, that stops. So if I'm not angry, I wouldn't speak. I wouldn't speak with anger. It's impossible. You can maybe if you I mean, you can say something, or let's put this way: Buddha's bodhisattvas have use this. So even though they are not angry, they can just pretend that as if they were angry. That's possible because their deeper mental level is not anger. So therefore, the only expression they can almost like assuming this sort of wrathful posture, and they say some harsh words. But that's harsh words, only word. But the depth is a beauty of compassion and goodwill, right? In our cases, most of the ordinary cases, when the fiery word comes out, our mind is already burning because of anger or rage or frustration or disappointment, something like that. And when that goes out, there's no fiery language. So automatically you can notice that when the ignorance is gone, ignorance goes away, and the ignorance, because ignorance results in two things. One is desire and aversion, right? Desire and aversion. Everything that we desire is an egocentric desire. Aversion is egocentric aversion. Something that harms our own interests, we become hateful. Something that is, cherishing, beautiful, goes with our interests. We want that. So that's why you notice that all the karmas, actions, physical and mental actions, are mostly performed under the influence of those two. Either we do it out of attraction or repulsion. And both attraction and repulsion have the seed of this confusion and ignorance, namely egocentricity, namely self-grasping. Now, that self-grasping is deeply seated. And now here's another important question. The question of course, one of the modern myths and scientific myths is that we are born with a sense of self. It's something to be celebrated. Well, it might be true. If they have a real self, then you can celebrate. But if you don't have, isn't that actually mythifying, reifying? Isn't it just confusion in being propagated? And that's precisely from Buddha's standpoint. Now, if you go deeply, and Buddha is saying that go deeply and search, where is that? Where is the self? The sense which you can celebrate at the end. And you notice that actually deep down, you are just bundle of changes, constant changes, as Hume would put it, bundle of perceptions. Buddha exactly said the same thing, bundle of perceptions, constant changing. There is nothing that actually holds these changes together. An example Buddha used is even during the time Buddha, there's a sister called Sister Vajira, one of Buddha's disciples, fully enlightened being. And Mara shows up and says, you are female, after all, women. Why do you actually sit there in this cave? Why don't you go out and enjoy? Have married? And she says, well, if from your perspective, there is a maleness and femaleness. And when I look into myself, I don't see maleness. I don't see the femaleness essence. She says, I'm just like a chariot. The favorite example, chariot. In chariot, the wheel is not chariot, axle is not chariot, the anchor is not chariot, the rein is not chariot. Collectively, you call some phenomena that works together as a chariot. Human beings are like that. But there is no one individual thing called male or female, or even man or woman. Now, why is this important? Well, because there's still the very strong myth or strong belief that this sense of egocentricity or sense of self is so intuitive that they cannot be changed. And that's why Buddha's teachings are so radical in the sense that, yes, it can be changed. Why? Because it's actually brought out because of confusion. because we are confused, we think that there is an intuitive sense of self that and egocentricity, and we think that egocentricity is the quality, intrinsic character that we have, identity that we have. Now, what Buddha once said, yes, on the one hand, that's a character, but we can fundamentally change it. The reason why fundamentally change it, because it begins with a confusion. And not only that, because it begins with the confusion, it brought all the pains and aches and the sufferings that we have, sense of loss, sense of fear. Why is it that we are scared of death? Why is it that we don't want to get old? Why is it there is some why is it that we cannot take somebody who actually challenges us, challenges our view, challenges our ideas? It's because of our own attachment in the sense of self, the self which does not exist in the first place. So then the question is, isn't it important for us to actually go and look where the self is? And then once you're totally convinced, but you can be only convinced when we ourselves actually do the work. If you ask somebody else to go and search somewhere in the library book, and if you haven't gone, somebody says, oh no, I didn't find that book. Even if you are not convinced, if you believe that there is a book there, until you go and search yourself, you will never be convinced that. So therefore, direct conviction has to come from one's own experience. And that's why the Buddha's teaching basically says, each one has to work. Nobody can bypass that responsibility. You cannot, even you have hundreds, millions of dollars, or maybe enormously powerful, you cannot bypass the duty if you really want to be a free individual in the end, free from suffering and being useful. One has to take the responsibility seriously, and that means go back to the body and look, observe what's happening there. And that's where the beauty is. And there, once that starts happening, the action stops. Action stops. When the action stops, the consciousness that is associated with that stops. Or then of course the whole cycle stops. And that's how the 6-12 dependent origination is basically reversed. Okay. Through the effect of 6 ayatanas, there is a contact. Through the effect of contact, there is a sensation. Now here is actually the technique, where the technique begins. Through the effect of sensation, there is a craving. Through the effect of craving, there is a grasping. Through the effect of grasping, there is a becoming. Right? Becoming, or our existence, comes because of craving. And that's later on. If you ask what is the cause of rebirth, all you need to answer is a desire. Because it is this desire or craving that actually becomes what we are. Now, if you don't like this, if you don't like rebirth, to be reborn again and again, that's what we need to finish it. Just believing that there is no rebirth actually can't stop that process. Just like refusing to believe that Tibet is not occupied. Tibet is still independent. We can believe that still, but the fact is it is occupied. Occupied by foreign force. In the same way, we can believe that we are a free individual. We are a free individual being with the enormous wisdom. But actually, the occupation in this case is not foreign occupation. Occupier is our own confusion. It is our confusion that has occupied. So if we really want to reclaim our freedom, that occupation by the ignorance has to be removed. What you call decolonized mind, right? If we really want to have a decolonized free mind, we have to look for what is responsible for colonizing our mind. And the colonizer is not some other agent. Colonizer is our own confusion and our own desires. So if you understand that perspective, then of course we tend to develop much more deeper appreciation for Buddha's teaching. Anyway, so that's how it works. And then you can see the reverse dependent origination is given this way. Through the cessation of ignorance, there is a cessation. Formation is a karma, basically, physical and mental activities that we perform. Through the cessation of formation, there is a cessation of consciousness. Through the cessation of consciousness, there is a cessation of name and form. Through the cessation of name and form, there is a cessation of 6 ayatanas. They are domains. You could cognitive domains. domains both external as well as internal, namely objects of cognition. Through the cessation of 6 ayatanas, there is a cessation of contact. Through the cessation of contact, there is the cessation of sensation. Through the cessation of sensation, there is a cessation of craving. Through the cessation of craving, there is a cessation of grasping. Through the cessation of grasping, there is a cessation of becoming. Through the cessation of becoming, there is a cessation of birth. Through the cessation of birth, there is a cessation of old age, death, misery, wailing, suffering, unhappiness, disturbance, all. Whole samsaric process ends. Now, for the meditator, I think for the meditator, an important thing you could say, okay, where is the weak link? Now we can see that, well, it begins with the confusion, then whole 12. For the meditator, this is the weak link, the contact. Where is the contact happens? And also to the cessation of this. Okay. Contact with when there's a contact, it gives rise to sensation, right? So remember, it is the sensation. Sensation is bodily experience or mental experience, and that's where the weakness is, because it is when there's a sensation experience. If you are attracted toward the sensation, then we create karma out of desire. If there's a sensation that is repulsive, we create karma out of hate. Now, for the meditator, what we do is we look with the sensation. Sensation is a bridge that takes you both into the land of Buddhahood and both into the land of samsara. Sensation is the bridge. In other words, your experience, our own experience, is the bridge that takes us either this direction or into that direction. So if we don't want to go into the realm of samsara, then we have to still use the sensation. Our experience is that the base. But the job is, when you use your sensation, you don't allow our mind to be occupied by occupied and repeat the same or react with the attachment and aversion, because attachment, aversion, and confusion. With that, we end up in samsara. Now, if we want to reverse that process, you use the sensation, you actually look at the body experience, you look at the bodily experience, and you, of course, nowadays, through scanning, going deeper, not only the surface, and going deeper, and later on, within your chakra system, because that's where the depth is. Initially, of course, you might say, okay, once your bodily sensation here ends, then you must say, okay, you have a very neutral, pleasant experiences throughout the body. But what happens? At a certain point, all your past karma start kicking in, okay? And then once they started kicking in, initially you don't realize, because your whole body experiences, and you really don't know where the point of those where the points, where the weaknesses, where they arises, and usually, and then of course, when you gradually go deeper, dissolving all the solidity, you will notice it's mostly within the spine, and that's where the old karmic system basically comes out. And when they comes out, they give rise to either pleasant experience or unpleasant experience. But then the beauty of that is, because once you go so deep, even it is very unpleasant experience, it always come in the form of vibration. It always come in the form of change, but it's very extremely painful, very painful, but still it's constant change, just like the sea waves. It's not like solid concrete pain that we suffer. The reason? Because of impermanence. Once we understand impermanence at the experiential level, pain is a very different pain. It's an energy, but very fluid energy. So therefore, the pinch that you get is not that strong. Anyway, so the point is, this bodily sensation is so important, because that is the bridge. And once you use that bodily sensation, then what happens? Through the we stop craving, because when the sensation stops, right, craving stops. Desire, and there's other side that is not being addressed. Not only craving, but also aversion, because sensation has both the side. So if it is pleasant sensation, we usually generate craving. But if it's unpleasant, we generate usually hatred. We have to both stop both of them because they are both karma, sort of, put this way, they are both karma production process. We don't want to stop, we want to stop both of them. So, but in order to stop the karma process, one has to use our own bodily experience. So that's why I think that for the practitioner, we have to come back to a body. If we cannot make use of this body, and it is something that we can understand everything in the head, I think it might be difficult. Most of this Buddha's teaching, deep teaching, will stay just at the intellectual level and not in the deeper process. And now what happens? The beauty that, of course, that beauty is then we have to die at certain points. We have to become old at a certain point. That doesn't matter. Old age doesn't matter. Because after all, once you're so immune to the change within oneself, that is just another transition, and Buddhists would call it. Now, of course, our body is worn out. Buddha says, this body, before he died, when he was 80, he announced to Ananda, he says, look, this body has been like a worn out cart. It is entangled, it is put together by different threads. And that is here. Now it's time to let it go. Now, how is it possible to face death in a very dignified way? For the meditator, of course, non-meditator will be difficult because a mind, we have never studied mind. For meditator, you have been trying to familiarize mind, and the reason, what happens? You stop meditating, keep meditating, awareness going, and then when the time for your life finishes, you are just focusing on awareness. And when you're fully aware of the change, you just a natural process, and the crude mental process will gradually sink, gradually cease, and then naturally you are able to move through the change. So there is no struggle in the struggle. You are not clinging to this life and being scared of the future, because that happens when our mind is just like that, confused. When our mind is fully focused on the present, that beauty is that we are able to move along with the present. Change. Present is a change, right? So you can be, we are able to move from, from the, let's say, from the crude gross mind to a subtle mind, and the subtle mind is in the end. Subtle mind is the mind that is associated with the subtle breath, subtle air, the oxygen that keeps us alive. And what happens? At a certain point, all the neurological brain function stops. Even this breath stops. And what happens? For somebody who is who has never tried to understand their mind, would have no idea how to observe the breath, crude breath, very rude, this strong breath. If you are not familiar with this, if you don't know how to observe this, then we have no way to understand the beauty of death. But otherwise, death is nothing but other than, for somebody who actually focus on the anapana, learn how to observe the breath, crude breath, and also gradually meditates, and at a certain point, meditators experience almost like a certain moment, sometimes 5 or a minute or even more, you don't breathe. Mind becomes so subtle, and you start actually whole your movement going within the chakra. That's what exactly happens when somebody dies. Everybody has to go through that process. But the beauty of the meditator is that you are not struggling, you are not fighting against, because you are moving with the present flow for the change. So that means you are no longer stuck with the present, stuck with the past, and clinging, sort of so fearful of the future, because you are not thinking. And what happens with that is that you gradually move with a subtle breath, and the subtle breath is what happens within your chakra, what we call nervous system. That will keep you alive. This is exactly the explanation what we begin Thukdam, right? Why is Thukdam mysterious for many individuals? Precisely because Thukdam, they are kept alive because of the subtle oxygen that is already in the body. And somebody who is able to observe the subtle breath can access that. So that's why the simple technique, you think, oh, this is why do we do this again and again? This sort of breath, everybody knows how to breathe. Yeah, but No, it's very, very, it takes a while for us to actually learn how to observe the breath. It is all in the observation and the awareness of the breath. And and remember, in most of the Tibetan practice, tantric practice is all about the subtle mind, subtle breath, subtle energy. You can talk about them, but you will never be able to use and access them unless you know how to use this crude breath. If you don't have actually skills to use this crude, coarse, cross technique of observing the breath, magic is not a magic and miracle. There is no way that you can, when your time is up, you will all of a sudden bounce back and understand the subtle breath and the subtle mind. No, there is no way. And that's why Buddha repeatedly said, hard work, hard work, hard work, and working correctly. And with that, of course, the whole process, even the death, is not a problem, precisely because in the end, because of this awareness, and the awareness and sustained awareness keeps our mind free from fear and free from expectation. If you don't have expectation of fear, there is no fear for death and dying. So that death and dying process, in that moment, it becomes a very precious moment, because then that moment you can use it now to strengthen the awareness, because now all your draft thoughts are gone. Now there's a perfect pure awareness, but it's stages of pure awareness, and you can actually use that to heighten one's potential. Anyway, sorry, I got passionate sort of somewhere here. But I think this is the, although you might have heard this formula many times, Tibetan rising, this is, you might think, oh, I know that, but you know how to count them. We really have to understand this, the mechanic on the body. So sometimes do this. Don't even read text. Don't even read scriptures. Look at your body and study it. And I'm quite sure that once your body says and listen to it and actually look, and you allow your body to speak through what you call experiential, and it won't be any different from Buddha's teaching. Because Buddha did exactly the same use. He used the same formula to mean this is his discovery. He didn't follow any previous teachings. He was just like a scientist, experimenting everything in his body, listening to what his body, what body speaks. Mind speaks, the relationship in mind and body. Let it allow to speak, and then learn it. Observe it. And with that observation, of course, it took to full enlightenment. And he was saying the same thing. If you just follow the path means in your own way, that of course that happens, but there is no magic miracle. Okay, so that's actually the heart of this teaching. I think this chapter is, and then eventually, of course, Sutra also talks about the 16 sons of Buddha become themselves Buddha, and they eventually become Buddha. And then what they do, of course, they also start teaching very widely the wide lotus of good Dharma, the Lotus Sutra. And there's a certain point, I think, where there's an analogy, useful analogy, and it says Buddha's teaching. And remember what Lotus Sutra is about. The focus is of Ekayana. There's only one yana. There's only one vehicle. All other vehicles are just a temporary transit point. And here's a good example given. Okay. Right. So that's not okay. Yeah. Now here's, I think, the skillful method is being, and 134. Yeah. Yes, if you look at 134, he says, because when the Tathagata sees that the time has come to passing into nirvana, he says, okay. Eventually, of course, Tathagata of course, has to pass away. And he announces that And what happens, he also gives this an example. He says, Tathagata's teaching, Ekayana teaching is almost like a transit point, a sort of the three vehicle doctrine is a transit point. Remember, Shravaka, Pratyek Buddha, and Bodhisattva, and then eventually Buddhayana. That's a transit point. And these are metaphor of a city, miraculous city. And he says, imagine that there's a whole merchants has a business, and Bodhisattva leads all that. And then he realized that most of them are very tired, exhausted, and because they think that, okay, the road ahead is too far, and they are almost about to give up the project of becoming fully enlightened. And this is what we feel, because that's why I think Shravakas or the Pratyek Buddhas, they think that Buddhahood is of too far a path, and they can't do that. So, but Buddha says, because of Buddha's skillful means, he basically displays here. When the guide knows that they have rested. Okay, so okay, so 336. Sorry, 136. The guide who has a skill in methods, knowing that the people who wish to turn back, things that distress people, must not fail to reach the great island of the jewels, right? So, because they are merchants, so they want to reach the great island jewels, or maybe you could say they want to become Buddha and Bodhisattvas, and that the real jewel is. But then, because the road is too far, and then once they are tired, exhausted, they give up and return. Buddha says, and then what the miraculous leader will do is basically, because miraculous leader has a miraculous power, so he creates an island somewhere in nowhere, beautiful island with so much of trees and so much of flower, and the people rest there. With the and then once they're fully relaxed, fully mind, then all of a sudden, of course, they what happened? The leader, miraculously make the whole island disappear. Now then, okay, they realize, because now fully rested, they are capable of going forward. So just in the same way, Shravaka and Pratyek Buddha are basically transit point. They are those illusion island, a resting point that Buddha taught, not with ultimate aim, just as a transition point, so that they actually, so that the beings don't give up the final project to reach the other shore of Buddhahood. Okay, so that's I think a significant point to be made here. And he says, Tathagata knows the weakness of the aspiration of beings is 139. Just as the guides conjure up a miraculous city for beings to rest in, and when they had rested, it told them that this was a miraculous city. In a way, bhikshus, Tathagata, the arahats, perfectly enlightened Buddha, endures a great skillful method so that beings may rest. And it is said here, describes and teaches two levels of intermediate nirvana. So therefore, basically, Buddha teaches two different types nirvana. One is nirvana, the type of nirvana that is Buddha enjoy, and type of nirvana that Shravakas and Pratyek Buddhas enjoy. And Shravakas and Pratyek Buddha and the nirvana, they are just a transit point. They are not the final rest point. Okay, so that's one thing. And other things, just before our time is up, unfortunately. Other thing. Yeah, I think that's it. I think in this chapter. And chapter 8 and 9, I think they're also fairly simple chapters, nothing much. But more prophecies. And so if next, I think if you can read until chapter 11. So because there are more prophecies. So in chapter 8, maybe there's some content to discuss. And there is a one simile there. Chapter 9, Prophecy of Ananda and Rahula. Again, not too much. So if you can read for next chapter until chapter 11, that would be great. Okay, so I think I've said so much. Sorry. If you have any questions, please. Yes, Jürgen?
I just a comment first. I'm just really impressed when I hear in the teachings about the concept way back then when these texts were written of the innumerable numbers of space and time, innumerable eons, and the talking about the space when nobody was really scientifically talking about those sort of things. But my question is, back in, I think I wrote it down somewhere, 7 verse 106, the factor of name and form in the causes of suffering. With too much focus on the body, would the body be seen as part of form in the causes?
Oh, yes. Remember, name and form, if you look at the 5 aggregates formula, this is one of the most distinctive, that's a distinctive take of Buddha's teaching, where individuality is not divided with these 2 basic so-called substances that you see in most entrenched in the modern, way of looking at. Either you are physical, or you are just made of 2 irreconcilably different substances. So if you held the 2 irreconcilably different substances, somehow you're religious. You believe either you're Christian or some other thing, because then you have a body and you have a soul. They are irreconcilable, because the immortal soul is immortal, unchanging, permanent. That's the belief. And then, of course, science came so harshly on that, and they said, no, there is no such a thing. We are just physical, through and through. The mind has no space. That point, we're just physical through and through. Mind is just a brain. That's what it is. Now, Buddha's approach is fundamentally different, because, of course, on the one hand, there's an enormous emphasis on the mind, because after all, Buddha says, understanding of mind is the most important thing. Now, but on the other hand, if you look even in the highest Yoga Tantra describes mind and body, is the relationship between the subtle wind and consciousness. And the movement of the mind is allowed because of the function of the breath, function of the wind, oxygen. In fact, the Tibetan word is life-supporting air. Life-supporting air is nothing but oxygen, right? So basically what it means is that the oxygen and the consciousness, they are so closely connected, they cannot be separated from each other. And therefore, the way in which in Tantra, especially Guha Samaja Tantra, Kalachakra Tantra, they understood mind and body to be non-dual. And now, so if you apply that formula in the 5 aggregates, one is Nama. Nama are the 5 known material aggregates, namely perception, or sensation, consciousness, and volition. These are 4 aggregates that are non-material. And then Rupa is the material aggregates, which actually constitute your body. But remember, even though there is this nominal distinction, the word is always a compound, Nama / Rupa. There's always together. It is not Nama and Rupa. It's named Nama / Rupa. There is no Nama without Rupa. Without Rupa, there is no Nama. The claim point is that we cannot have human body without mind. Without mind, there cannot be human body. So that's the indivisible, inalienable unity between mind and body, which is fundamentally different from the way in which modern, even so-called science understood, because science are so First of all, I think science should know little about consciousness. It's just all about, all on the basis of behavior. Okay, based on certain behavior, there's a project certain thing, but they're, I mean, understandable because they think that they came as a reaction against a more religious belief of immortal soul. But Buddhism is not suggesting there is immortal soul. Mind is a process, also events, what we call cognitive events. Just as a body is a cognitive event. Don't think there's a concrete matter is some sort of tiny thing that doesn't change. Buddha never accepted such a thing. The reason the whole universe is a constant flow, constant flux, and it's gels very well with the scientific notion of quantum mechanics. The idea that whole universe is fluid. The way in which Nagarjuna puts, wherever emptiness is possible, there everything is possible. Wherever emptiness is not possible, there anything is not possible. The idea that emptiness, remember we were talking about, emptiness means the empty of any essences, empty of having any specific identity. If we as an individual have some specific identity, if you are, let's say, if you have your specific identity as Sarah or John, something that you can literally have a referent within you, then unfortunately you will be like you will are frozen in the past. You are frozen in the past. Dead, frozen in the past, are dead, and you cannot be alive, brought back into life. Now, Buddha fundamentally rejected that ontology and say life is basically doesn't have any essences and becomes whatever they are in the process. So therefore, emptiness means interdependent origination. Dependent origination, we just read the formula. That also means everything. The human being, as there is no individual soul, no intrinsic identity, and with that you can bring the relationship of mind and body into a very beautiful synergy. So where there is not only diachronic relation but synchronic relation. The relation or causation is not a linear but also symbiotic, because usually people think of cause and effect. Oh yeah, cause in the past, in the present, in effect in the future, and then like that always. No, not that kind of relation. On the one hand, yes, you can mathematically think about that, but our human body-mind relationship is both the diachronic as well as synchronic. There's a time sequence, but at the same time, it's a temporal, because certain things happens in the past, but that thing does not determine whole thing in the future. There are present things that actually also helps. So that's why relationship in the cause and effect. It is a cause and effect that makes things happen. And just like the mind nama rupa relationship, right? So if we want to understand Buddha's project as Buddha wants us to understand, we have to go back into a body, because you can't have access to your mind at the moment. At a certain point for a meditator, yes, mind becomes more accessible. But at the moment you must say, okay, observe your mind. What are you going to observe? I say, okay, observe your mind. You'll close your eyes and then start thinking about things like, oh, I'll start about, oh, maybe tomorrow I'm doing this. No, we are not thinking about, we are not actually doing meditation. We are speculating, imagination. It's totally against Buddha's teaching. If we speculate, imagine, then God comes in. Pegasus will come in. Unicorns will come in, because you start imagining all sorts of things, and then soul will come. Anything that concrete and identity, because all the fictions will come together. But Buddha was saying, Buddha's basically whole method is observe, sambarganya. That means sustained observation, means not just speculate, imagine, observing. And how do you observe? First with your body. And when you start observing your body, and this body, it looks so solid for us at the moment. It becomes just at a certain point, it breaks up. And you will realize, first thing you will realize that this body is just like the water, the waves in the ocean, with no solidity, just totally liquid, fluid, almost like you are pouring one bowl of water into another jar. That fluidity, there's nothing, no solidity whatsoever. And then now once you actually get to that some sort of stage, okay, then wherever your mind, then you can just literally sit, and then wherever you not even with a certain specific object of meditation, you will realize you can catch your mind in action. But that may take a little bit of time. But in order to do that, one has to dissolve this whole body, the solidity, because mind works. Of course, mind is always with the solidity, but because that's why, remember, Buddha has this 4 formula. Mindfulness, form foundation mindfulness, but mostly it has to begin with the foundation of body, mindfulness of body, and you use mindfulness of body, develop mindfulness of body by developing mindfulness of bodily sensation. Because otherwise you won't be able to observe your body without observing what happens on the body. And that's what happens with the body is bodily sensation. And once you, of course, work with that technique for some time, at least some time, and that will allow you to dissolve this whole structure. I mean, not forcefully, just you observe, simply observe, mind start penetrating piercingly, and then whole thing solidity will break. And then you will realize at a certain point, you start seeing you are just like the sands. Whole solidity is just like when you go to the beach, look at those sands. Nothing, no structure, no whole, your so-called solid body is just like that. Start almost collapsing from every direction. Nice. At that certain point, even your teacher will say, now, don't regulate your mind. Don't just go through this, because usually our technique is to go from head to the toe to the head for a certain time, until the whole solidity breaks. But when the whole solidity breaks, there's no head, there's no toe. Whole solidity is just like a fluid. And then your job is now, just let whole your awareness free. But that might take us a little bit of time. So before getting to that, first step is using this body and the bodily awareness of the body, and then of course gradually reaching the mindfulness of mind and mindfulness of mental content. Because then, okay, anything that comes in your head, you can actually focus. You can literally catch it, but catch it only in your body. So at the moment, okay, when you think, all right, so when you are so angry, somebody said you something, and when you look at your anger, your mind is so engrossed with anger, but you don't feel it in your body. But at a certain point, you will notice that your anger, so-called thought, is intimately mixed with the body, and your whole body will feel it. This is one of the Buddha's deepest insights. Sabbe dhamma vedana samosarana. Every thought that occurs in the mind culminates to bodily sensation. For the meditator, these are deep insights. For I think so. These are the sort of revolutionary insights. Buddha basically, literally challenge us, and we are in this so-called super scientific world, and we don't even come to terms with, because we don't seem to challenge ourselves enough. Buddha saying, don't take anything for granted. Don't believe anything. Not Buddha's teaching, not even the text, even though, of course, this sutra, of course, is something slightly different. But tradition for the meditator, yes, everything has to be scrutinized so systematically. And because after all, you're walking, you can't jump, high jump. People sometimes tend to think that, yes, you can literally, if you have a 3-story, remember the 3-story building that is under, a lot of stress because of fire? Don't ever think that you can sort of, from the 1st story, you can jump to the 3-story. No. You have to go systematically, and you have to use your body to go that, take the systematic path. And once you start actually exploring this systematically, at a certain point, most of the Buddha's teaching will make sense, perfect sense. There's no contradiction between so-called Tantra at the moment. Sometimes you might think Tantra is such a mystical, something, but they will make only sense when we get systematically start working. So when the, maybe I shouldn't say it. Okay. So I think I said enough. Okay. Other questions? You have a question.
Sonam,
Yeah.
Please don't apologize about getting passionate.
Is that a question?
No, because
Joking,
for
joking.
me, you're like a sailing boat, and a sailing boat without wind doesn't get things across. And the way you talk, like you did now, the answer, it was just fueled by compassion, and then you get things across.
Oh, I don't have compassion.
No, but
Anyway.
at a certain point you said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting passionate." And this is absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much
Thank you.
for
So
continuing to be passionate.
But unfortunately, sometimes you get distracted. That's the problem.
About this, you don't have to tell me.
Okay. Any questions?
Just to say thank you for the answer. And if you ask Sonam a question, you will always get a very thorough answer.
Sorry, long one, very long one. Yeah. Okay. So looks like no questions.
So Sonam, just confirming the reading for the next group was right through from chapter 8 to chapter 11.
Yes, please. Because I think there's not much in the chapter 8, nothing much on chapter 9. So I think we might be able to just where there are a few sections that I can comment. Because I mean, others I can't. I don't. Well, I wouldn't say I don't. Maybe I don't understand, and that's why there's not much. Not much to add. But if you have a different view, please let me know. If you are interested in certain passages that talks about the names and you know. But other than that, I think there's not much. So
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Sonam. So I think we'll say that our next session will be on September 25th.
Oh, 7:25. Okay.
Moving it along, like we've done a few weeks on the fourth Saturday, so we'll continue. So the 25th of September will be our next session.
Okay.
Thank you, Sonam.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dedication, meditation, dedication. Thank you
Sure.
so much.
Once again, come back to your breathing. Sustain observation of your breathing for several moments. Thinking nothing, just observing the natural flow of breath as it comes in and goes out. Once your mind is calm and quiet and peaceful, develop rejoice, deep sense of rejoice in your mind. Rejoicing what you have, the opportunities you have. Thinking deeply about Dharma, the higher meaning of Dharma, or to make one's life more meaningful, more compassionate. When you start rejoicing, you will appreciate what you have. Feel contented with what you have. And contentment, Buddha said, is one of the best virtue ingredients for happiness. With contentment, you're not looking, you're not seeking. Completely fulfilled, happy and satisfied. But you want to share your positive thoughts. For the well-being of others whom you love. Or even the others whom you don't love. Others whom you have neglected, disregarded. So you can start with your loved ones. You can visualize, imagine as if they are sitting next to you or around you. From the deep sense of care and love. Send forth the vibration of love. May they flourish in their life. May they enjoy what they're doing, their life. May they have fulfillment. You can visualize a light ray radiating from your heart towards all your loved ones. Without any discrimination. May I be able to make them happy. Help them so that they can fulfill. Help them so that they can flourish. May I be able to free myself from anger, hatred, animosity, anxiety, fear, so that I can serve my loved ones better without being angry, without being hateful. May I be able to help them with love, free from hate, free from disappointment, frustration. May I become stronger in my Dhamma practice. I will make myself stronger in Dhamma practice. I will free myself from anger, from tendency to become angry, fearful, hateful, revengeful. So that I can help others and loved ones better. You can gradually expand the net, thinking about all other beings, humans, animals, seen, unseen. May all beings be free from suffering. Anywhere in the world. May they flourish. May they not commit evil so that they suffer the consequence. May I be able to intervene to help them to grow in Dhamma, so that they can realize their potential. Ultimate potential. May I be able to forgive all those who have done me wrong, in words, in action, in past, in the present. May I grow in Dhamma, so that I have strength, gain strength to forgive all. All those who mistreated me. May I be able to love all beings equally, without any prejudice. And may I be able to work hard to attain the ultimate freedom from anger, from attachment, so that I will be able to stop all my prejudices, biases, towards all beings. Like this, you can think different ways. Use different reason to strengthen your love. Strengthen the cultivation of loving kindness. May all beings be free, free from suffering, free from causes of suffering. May all beings be fully liberated. May all beings become Samyak Sambuddha. And may I be able to facilitate in any way, in whatever way I can. Avatu Sabbama. Avatu Sabbamangala. Avatu Sarvamangalam. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sonam. A wonderful session again this morning. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for joining. And wonderful to see you all. And everyone take care. And we hope to see you again next month. Yeah.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sonam.
Thank you, Sonam. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
A lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Mhm.